We are in the home stretch. In the home stretch. I think there's 2 more Sundays after this.
Okay.
And then we're going to get ourselves into Revelation. Godfrey. And
Who is that? The horned beast. We're
yeah,
gonna find that out.
it's a very interesting spin he has on it. He has a different take on it than what you normally would hear. And I think you'll, I know, I binged on the thing. That's how good it was as far as I was concerned. I did the whole series in about, it's 20, I think it's 24 sessions, and I did them in, I did it all in 2 weeks.
Well, I like the letters to the churches.
Yeah,
Very easy to teach on and work on and that. The rest of it is all true. But wow.
yeah, yeah. So, but the way that he goes through it is very interesting, and it's not, I guess I want to say it's not as phenomenal as maybe dispensationalists make it, and some of the folks that are pre-mill, maybe.
I'll know when I get it. Mark knows.
Yeah.
Mark's
Yes,
got it
Mark
down.
has that.
He knows exactly God was.
Yes, he does. Not only that, but other things as well.
Of course.
The I think you could mix. This is entitled "The Church That Remembered," and it's from Philippians 4:10-18. And Dr. Boyce talks first about churches that were remembered, and you think about the 7 churches and how were they remembered, you know, and each of the churches, if we would go in and look at them, there's a specific thing that they were remembered for, and other churches as the first century unfolded and how those churches were remembered. And the Philippian church is remembered in a completely different way. And that's what we're going to take a look at today. So, Bill, I am going to ask you to open with prayer, even if we don't have the.
Father, I'm so glad to be here this morning. I thank you for this class, Father. I thank you that we can have the privilege and the wonder of opening your word and sharing it and discussing it, and that's so important, Father. Thank you for Dennis and the work that he does. I know he puts a lot of work into it. I'm grateful for that. So I ask that as we finish up and go into Philippians today, Lord, that you would open our minds and our hearts. Not that this would be some intellectual thing, but it would penetrate our hearts, because that's where the fruit is born. And that's what we ask all of us in Jesus' name.
Amen. All right, the church that is remembered. Okay. Okay, so let's read this together. Can everybody see it? That's pretty small. Did everybody see it okay?
What, verse 10?
Yeah, 10-18.
New King James?
Yes.
Okay.
But I rejoiced in the Lord greatly, now that at last your care for me has flourished again, though you surely did care, but you lacked opportunity. Not that I speak in regard to need. I have learned in whatever state I am to be content. I know how to be abased, and I know how to abound. Everywhere and in all things, I have learned both to be full and to be hungry, both to abound and to suffer need. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Nevertheless, you have done well that you shared my distress. Now you Philippians know also that at the beginning of the gospel, when I departed from Macedonia, no church shared with me concerning giving and receiving, but you only. Not even in Thessalonica, for even in Thessalonica, you sent aid once and again for my necessities. Not that I seek the gift, but I seek the full fruit that abounds to your account. Indeed, I have all in abound. I am full, having received from Epaphroditus the things sent from you, a sweet smelling aroma, an acceptable sacrifice, well pleasing to God. Now, in verse 10, one of the things that we see here is he rejoiced. He's thankful for what they have given to him and how they have given to him. And the care that they show for him is ongoing. It wasn't just a one-time deal, but it's an ongoing thing for him. And he talks about you cared for me and it flourished again. So it happened again. Though you surely did care, but you lacked opportunity. You know what I think about that? They didn't have the internet then. So when Paul was away, they lost touch with him. But as soon as they got back in touch with him and they heard about his needs, they responded to it. And he talked about the fact that other churches didn't remember him, didn't do this for him.
These are important missionary verses.
Yes, they are.
They really are.
Yes, they are.
They had a special relationship. You had the other churches, they had a good relationship.
Yeah.
But this way, they had a close, intimate
Yes.
relationship.
Yes, Paul was there, and a lot of people came to Christ under him, and he must have laid a pretty good foundation because there weren't a ton of issues there like the other churches.
It's interesting too that Paul, if this is the Roman arrest, if this is the first imprisonment in Rome, he had to pay for his own upkeep.
Yes.
So he had to quote rent a house, pay for his food. Rome did not. They
Yeah.
chained him to this guy. So this is important.
So why is Paul content in all circumstances?
He has a higher vision, which is not easy to get.
Okay.
He knows this is passing, but he grasps onto what doesn't.
He knows need. He knows need. He says that. And he says, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And so he understands that the relationship that he has with Christ transcends everything else. And content means self-sufficient. Now, that kind of seems like, oh, wait a minute, if it's self-sufficient, but he's depending on Christ. How does that? How can we kind of figure that out? Because if content means or content means self-sufficient, if it means self-sufficient, but he says, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And he talks about all this, and what you just said, he's looking at this bigger picture. How can he be self-sufficient?
I don't think it means he is self-sufficient within himself. I think he means I'm starving to death. I know my death is imminent, and I'm content with it. That's what I think. I mean, I'm not saying that's the situation he's in, but I think that's the situation. You know where you are. You know that there's probably no opportunity to get food. There's no one coming on a white horse to rescue you. I'm content with if I'm to die of starvation. I'm content with that. If the white horse does come bringing a roast beef sandwich, I'm content with that too. I mean, that's
Yeah.
my picture of it.
Okay. And the idea here is that his self-sufficiency comes from Christ. Okay, that's where it comes from. It's not like he's doing it on his own. He's content because he rests in Christ.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where his sufficiency comes from. It's not outside. It's not outside of him.
I used to call that, it may be an oversimplification, but we face all these trials in life, but we have an eternal perspective. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So if you're not a Christian, you're a non-believer, And everything that happens to you in life is the totality of everything. But we don't have that. We have an eternal perspective. Mark told me, I had a conversation one time, he says, you know, Bill, he says, I'm not afraid anymore.
Yeah.
He says, I'm not afraid.
Good examples of Joe. Look what that man had. And all that capacity he went through his life. And what did he say? The Lord's with him. The Lord takes it away. And blessed be the Lord.
That's good.
Time out.
I know.
Oh, okay. We got
Hot off the press.
Hot off the
Little
press.
late.
I asked for extra ones so that we can. You guys look on, even though I asked them for more, but we didn't get them.
Well, since you're sitting up front and you're in the zone, go for it, my friend.
I'm the mediator.
I defer to the gentleman from Pittsburgh.
Everlasting Creator Father, I have destroyed myself. My nature is defiled. The powers of my soul are degraded. I am vile, miserable, strengthless, but my hope is in thee. If I am saved, it will be by goodness undeserved and astonishing, not by mercy alone, but by abundant mercy, not by grace, but by exceeding riches of grace. And such thou hast revealed, promised, exemplified in thoughts of peace, not of evil. Thou hast devised means to rescue me from sin's perdition, to restore me to happiness, honor, safety. I bless thee for the everlasting covenant, for the appointment of a mediator. I rejoice that he failed not, nor was discouraged, but accomplished the work thou gavest him to do, and said on the cross, it is finished. I exalt in the thought that thy justice is satisfied, the truth established, thy law magnified, and a foundation is laid for my hope. I look to a present and personal interest in Christ and say, surely he has borne my griefs, carried my sorrows, won my peace, and healed my soul. Justified by his blood, I am saved by his life. Glorifying in his cross, I bow to the scepter. Having his spirit, I possess his mind. Lord, grant that my religion may not be occasional and partial, but universal, influential, effective, and may I always continue in thy words as well as thy works, so that I may reach my end in peace.
Well, everything he says here is summed up in two sentences. The foundation is laid for my hope. And then you go, wait, I missed it here. Oh, boy, I missed it. I'll get it. He laid the foundation, laid for my hope. And go to the top, there's another one. I lost it. Rats.
This is apropos to our study this morning, and it answers the question that you asked about him. How is Paul content in all things? Because the foundation is laid for his hope.
Yeah.
He has a mediator.
So we can just go home.
That's it.
No, did you find it, Bob?
Yeah, I'm gonna find, keep going with it.
Okay.
They're tied together.
How about justified by his blood and saved by his life? That's it.
Thou hast devised means to rescue me from sin's perdition. And let's take tied together.
Yes, yeah, he's devised means for the overcoming of sin, and he laid a foundation for our hope. And that is really important to think about, because I think hope and joy, the rejoicing that we're talking about, they're tied together. They really are tied together. Because if you don't have hope, if you don't have the hope of the gospel, how can you have joy? Because as we talked early on, our circumstances bring us happiness, but our relationship with God and through Christ brings us joy. And so circumstances, R.C. has said that circumstances only are temporary. This is a paraphrase, but are only temporary as opposed to the joy that is everlasting.
But you still have to work personally through everything that's going on in your life. I mean, it's not easy.
Yeah.
I mean, you can say these words, and I agree with all this, but the thing is, in our weakness, we have to work through it.
Well, yeah,
It
and
takes time to work through.
well,
it.
that's the process of sanctification. And for all of us, there's, as I've said before, there are different levels of sanctification. And where I am and where you are two different things. So you're right. We have to work through things. Some people breeze through life and never have to have much of anything to deal with.
Yeah,
I mean, there's some folks that just boom.
or you could be like Mary Baker Eddy. You can say, I'm in severe pain, but I know it's not real.
Yeah.
Yeah. That doesn't work.
Yeah. Also, she did that.
Think better thoughts.
Yeah. So, so anybody else have anything?
Yeah, about bowing to his scepter. And I agree you bow to the scepter, but also that scepter is extended to you and you can walk in confidence, not of yourself, but coming with the righteousness of Christ. Somewhere, I think it's called, it says we can walk in confidence into the throne room.
Mm-hmm.
So,
His scepter is perfect and straight.
yeah, but it doesn't.
The straighter a scepter, the better the king was back. We go back to Christ's perfect.
Yeah.
Scepter, speech, not.
Well, that's what Esther was concerned about, was the scepter going to be extended that she could come in.
That she could come in, yeah.
And we can come in with confidence.
Even though they cut her flowers down and everything.
Oh, yeah.
I did it again, because I was getting this way.
All right. So content means self-sufficient, but it's not self-sufficient in the sense that you can live your life because you're kind of in a bubble and everything is taken care of for you. It's that your self-sufficiency is your hope that you have through your relationship through Christ.
Seems like the key word there is I have learned.
We're getting to that. We're getting to that.
I'm not learned either.
That's good.
Yeah, we're going to get to that. And here's John MacArthur says, though his situation was extremely difficult, Paul was not discontent. It did not matter that he was a prisoner, living in a small apartment, chained to a Roman soldier, this is exactly what Bill said, consisting on a sparse diet. None of that affected his content.
Think about what Paul loved to do. His driving passion of his life was to preach the gospel. Now he's got this soldier chained to him all day, right? I'd like to be that soldier.
Yeah.
Talk about a captive audience. We've had already, all I said, Jesus, leave me alone.
Why do you think Dr. Boyce entitled this chapter of his book, A Church Remembered? And I touched on that.
Because it was a joyful church.
And
Too many.
this church remembered him. Not just that he remembered this church, but this church remembered Paul. And remember, this is what Dr. Boyce entitled it, not Paul. Paul's not saying, hey, you remembered, hey, you remembered me. But, it's because the Philippians never forgot about him. They never forgot about him. And they were concerned. They had concern of him. And they supported him.
You get the impression that there is a special relationship between him and his church.
Yes.
It's not like the other churches.
Paul wasn't encumbered by a wife or a family. That would put a whole different perspective on it.
Yeah. And then the other churches did not support it. Didn't support it. So now we go to, and we want to talk about the generosity, Christian generosity.
4:10.
One Christian has enough because another is generous. Understand that? One Christian has enough because another is generous.
Take that apart, if people, the others were not generous, then even the other Christian wouldn't have it.
Well, it might be that that Christian is a businessman, and that's why he has enough. It's not that he's getting something from other Christians necessarily. So a Christian who is a successful businessman, for example, he gives to Christians that are not as well off as he is. And this is, again, as you were saying, this has a mission, sort of a mission emphasis to it.
That's what the PCUSA lost.
Yeah,
I mean, I think this church does that very well. We have a list of benevolence. We're not involved day to day in these ministries, but we're helping them and supporting.
the PCUSA has closed down their missions.
Really?
They fired they only had 41 missionaries left. They fired them all.
Really?
Yeah,
Why did they do that?
because they don't think missions is worth it.
Just, then they don't read Philippians, obviously.
Yeah, their thing, and this has been going to happen for 150 years. Back when Machen, Steve went through the digging deeper, and Machen was upset because of the fact that the missions were not going in and giving the gospel. They were just going in and, giving some food, social work, and those kinds of things. But they didn't take the bread of life to them. So Machen said, I'm going to start my own mission board. And of course, that's what got him kicked out, basically.
So good mission work should be a combination of both.
Yes.
When I spent the little time I spent in Ukraine, the gospel was forefront, but they also opened orphanages. They brought the children in from the street, housed them, fed them, and preached the gospel.
Yeah.
So it's a combination.
Yes, absolutely. Okay. And generous Christians help the needy ones. Generous Christians help the needy ones. And so even when the Philippians had no opportunity, they were concerned, even though they didn't know that where he was. And it's literally an ongoing concern. So even when the Philippians didn't know where Paul was, they were still concerned for him. They were still concerned for him. And it's literally an ongoing concern. And there needs to be generous sentiment. Okay, don't you have a class today? Yeah. Oh, well, welcome. There's a generous sentiment among believers. And it's a means of Christian fellowship. One of the things about folks being generous is the idea that it enhances Christian fellowship. And it is Christian fellowship because you're supporting others and you're helping others. So this is all based on Weldon, where Paul talked about the Philippian church and how they supported it in different ways, and other churches didn't. And the Philippians were even concerned when they were out of touch with him while he was traveling. And they were still concerned, and when they found out that he had needs, they met them. And they sent gifts through Epaphroditus. So it's a means of Christian fellowship. And I'm going to share a verse with you in a minute that I think really encapsulates the idea They shared his trouble. They shared his trouble. They shared his ministry. And so, it's so important to understand that. And so they shared his ministry. And the generosity that we have lays up treasures in heaven. Okay, it lays up, and again, it's a means of Christian fellowship. They shared his trouble. Why did they do that? Okay, I got stuff repeated here. But that's okay. Okay, and this is the verse that I want to share with you. This is from 3 John 1:5-8. I was years ago when I was doing a lot of pulpit supply when I was working at Geneva College. I was going back to churches. When you do pulpit supply, a lot of times you only need one sermon, and you can use it week after week as long as you're going to different places. Well, I was getting called to go back to some of these churches that didn't have pastors. Dave Licious and I kind of shared these churches. And so I had to start writing some new sermons. And I thought, what? And I thought, I've never heard a sermon on 3 John. So I thought I would look at it. So here's what I came up with. This is part of what I came up with. Beloved, you do faithfully whatever you do for the brethren and for strangers who have borne witness of your love before the church. If you send them forward on their journey in a manner worthy of God, you do well, because they went forth in his name's sake, taking nothing from the Gentiles. We therefore ought to receive such, that we may become fellow workers for the truth. That we may become fellow workers is a key to what we do in supporting missions, in supporting people that are involved in ministry. We're sharing in that ministry. And I'll just use my work as an example. Every person at Hopewell that I touch, you're sharing in that ministry, because you support me, the church supports me, and so you're sharing in that ministry. And it's the same way with as we share with for example, the Hurries. And the reason they come to mind is a post that was on Facebook this morning from them. And there are wildfires in Cape Town, and they're close to where they are. They're not in danger, but they're not far from where they are. So there's wildfires everywhere. And so we're sharing in their ministry and what they do and what they have. And when you get down through all the missionaries that we support, everything that we support, the pregnancy center, your work with the pregnancy centers, we support you in that. We're sharing in that ministry. Every baby that gets saved, we're sharing in that ministry. And that's an important thing to remember. We're not just our missionaries are not compartmentalized. They're just not out there and we say, okay, we support them. No, we support them. We really support them. And we share in their ministry. So generosity is also a Christian discipline. The first factor is generosity to others. That's the first factor of Christian discipline in terms of generosity to others. Okay, so as we are generous to others, again, we're sharing with them. If they're in ministry, we're not only sharing with them, but we're also involved in their ministry and sharing their ministry. The second is attitude towards circumstances. We need to always remember that circumstances are not what brings joy. Joy comes from a relationship with God and the hope that we have in Him. And so one of the things that we need to do in terms of circumstances is not to covet. Not to covet. Okay, so the person who is receiving generosity should, or maybe needs generosity, still is not to covet. They're still not to covet. And that's part of the discipline of giving. So Paul did not complain about want. What did he say? He was content. Yeah, yeah. He had restful contentment. It's a restful contentment. We're content in all circumstances. Paul's content in prison. He's content being chained to somebody. He's content knowing he's going to go on trial, and the outcome of that trial could be his death.
But he's not pain-free.
No, but he's still content.
Yeah, I know, but I mean, within a.
You know, when I delivered pizza years ago, a long time ago, I never felt like a tip was something I deserved. I always felt the tip was grace. That people wanted. There was one time though. There was one time that I was not happy with the tip that I received. We was delivering pizza in the university area, and the power went out, and I had a delivery on the 8th floor of one of the hotels. So I had to take the steps, and the guy gave me a big $1.50 tip, and I was not happy about that. That, you know, and I need to repent even today about that.
What would you say if you bought a tent for Paul, who was a tent maker, or I don't know how many you made, and your tent had a hole in it, Paul said, no, Dennis, you ought to be just content in that tent.
That is such a Bob question.
Well, I guess I would have to say, Paul, if you don't repair it, I'll figure something out.
I'm sorry, it's out of warranty.
Yeah. But Paul learned to be content. Paul learned to be content. Wow, we're moving along here.
I was thinking this morning, actually, just it crossed my mind about the Wadhams that several, I guess it was probably 5 or 6 years ago now, that they had sent out, here's a status, status update from the missionaries, and there was an identified need, but I don't think that they just asked for prayer. And then the WIC said, well, let's not do the poinsettias this year. Let's send them the money that we were going to spend on poinsettias.
They wanted money for dresses or something?
I think his dad had passed it, was that?
Their daughters. Yeah.
Was it?
Yeah, it was
Something
money for the
I
daughters.
forget what it was, but anyway, but it ended up being a huge blessing. I want to say his dad was bad. He needed to go to South Africa or something. But the point was that they didn't ask for anything. They asked for prayer.
Yeah.
And then the WIC stepped up and said, let's not buy poinsettias this year. Let's send it to our missionaries. And they've done it ever since, I think.
Isn't that the group that we made the bags and filled them with all the stuff and send them as well?
Yeah, for the girls.
And they were grateful for it.
Yeah.
So just kind of like Paul, it says, thank you.
Yes.
It's not what they expected. Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, as working as a missionary, when something comes in totally unexpected, and to be honest with you, I don't try to raise money, unlike the rest of FCA staff. I was talking to my director and telling him about my son retiring, and he was chaplain in the Navy, and I said something about he even got full disability. He said, oh well, then you can ask him for more money. I'm like, seriously? I got out of one of the reasons I got out of the business, I got out of selling insurance. When I sold insurance, I had to look at every one of you as a possible client. That had to be the first thought in my mind. And I hated that because the first thought in my mind is, where are you spiritually? That's where my mind is. And I tried different times to get into the business world. And every time it came back to that. Even when I had my own business and I could control a lot of it, I still had to think in the same way. I had to try to figure out a way to talk to people about insurance. and I really want to talk to people about the Lord. So,
Maybe you could talk to that guy that gave you the dollar.
well, and the other, he was drunk, and that was the other thing. Drunks were really good tippers, but he wasn't. I don't know. He was in the dark. He was just in the.
That's right.
He might have. So,
When I used to, when I was going to school, I was your local phone guy with my little green truck and the Princess phones and all that good stuff. And I've always noticed when I went into neighborhoods to put phones in, people with the least money would give you the biggest tip.
mm,
You know,
The people that have
Yeah,
a lot were
yeah.
just as tight and stingy as could
you
be.
know, stores in different areas of Charlotte. And when I ran a store in the most area where the rich people lived, those were the people that wanted to argue about how much we were charging for things and why everything was so expensive. And then you go to the poor neighborhoods and,
They understand.
yeah.
I always felt that was interesting.
So do you want to talk a little bit more? You mentioned about Paul learned. You want to talk a little bit more about what you were thinking?
I don't know, I haven't learned that.
Yeah.
It's just interesting. Even for Paul, he just didn't fall out of heaven.
Yeah.
He had to wrestle with everyone.
Yeah. Yes.
Let's just get better.
Yeah. I mean,
What's my accomplishment for? We had to wrestle with that.
Yeah.
You're with me.
When you look at his list of what happened to him, I was stranded alone at sea. I was a number of times, I was 39 minus 1 lashes. I was imprisoned, all this. So that was a college for Paul. He got the practical lesson saying, okay,
when you think
I
about it,
understand.
when Paul was working as a Pharisee, doing his dirty work to the church, I think he was poor. I don't think so. I think the Pharisees were probably pretty rich. Yeah. So that's what he's saying. I know abundance.
I think his family was wealthy too, because they bought their Roman citizenship.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And so what happens when you say to God, I'm yours, Lord, do whatever you want with me. You better fasten your seatbelt.
So he knew abundance.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden he gets knocked off his horse, has a conversion experience. Now he starts going around talking to people in churches. And first of all, he's probably now going to be cut off from his family financially. And so he's going to be almost thrust into poverty. So now I learned how to live abundantly. Now I know how to live with nothing.
But he had met the risen Christ on that road, in that moment. He had found the pearl of great price.
Yeah.
And he just changed his whole being.
And when you think about it, we think about the teaching that Jesus did about not worrying about where you're going to lay your head. The birds are taken care of. How much more are you going to be taken care of? And that probably becomes more of a reality if you lose everything, or if you don't have anything to begin with. If you don't have anything to begin with, I don't know how other people grew up. My family was not rich. I used to think that maybe they're not going to have enough money to buy food this week. Not that we weren't going to have food, but I knew that my dad got paid every other week, twice a month, and I knew that one of the paychecks was less than the other because it was like a draw, and then they gave him the full amount, less that draw at the end of the month. But the last check in the month was a big one, and I always thought, do we make it on that little check? I had no idea how much money my parents made. I had no idea, but I knew that they had to stretch to do things, I guess. You know, if there was something that went on, they had to stretch to do things. And yeah, some people have, but we were always pretty content, at least as kids we were. But you learn, you know, how your life goes. Anything else about that? You know, just thinking about the teaching of Jesus, what Paul's saying here.
I think you need to, this is kind of going to the covet part, but what's your state of heart and what you're doing? It's all well and good to say that you're being generous, but for what purpose are you doing it? Because you want self-aggrandizement, you want praise for what you've done, or are you doing it because it's truly the right thing? You think about, y'all might need to help me with this. It was Ananias and his wife, Sophia, and they gave to the church. They sold their land, they gave to the church, but they held back. And it wasn't what they gave, it's that they said that they gave everything. They sold their property, they gave everything, they lied.
They lied, yeah.
But they did it for what purpose? For people to look what they did.
Yeah.
You know? So it's their state of heart, right? So
Yeah.
if you think about God struck them down,
And
he doesn't strike you down for doing the same thing,
but in essence, they were coveting
yes.
something that they should have been given. You know, they were coveting that.
The immediate verses before that is that Barnabas sold a plot of land, gave all his money to the apostles, and everybody's going, Barnabas, well, what a great guy. And they figured we want a little slice of this glory too.
And it would have been fine if they had said, we sold our land and we gave 50% of it to the church or whatever, and everybody would have been content with that. But no, we give it all. Did you now? Okay.
Right.
There's also wisdom in your generosity. Because just because it says Christian doesn't mean it's a good thing.
Has to do with your attitude. Really, what circumstances you're in.
Yeah.
Your attitude I don't think God's gonna ask us to do more than what he already has established, but I don't know. I'm a Christian in some things, but it's your attitude and how you approach people, how you approach circumstances. Is it a godly attitude or is it all about me? Is it a self-centered attitude? Well, I'm gonna do this. That's my thing. God may say, well, actually, you're not gonna be able to do that this time.
Yeah.
This is what's gonna happen to you. Okay, well, thank you, Lord, and move on, but it's really an attitude problem.
Yeah.
And it's a learned thing, because I don't think you develop that attitude of Christ being number one in your life until you're really moving into the realm of Christianity and community and all this other stuff. But you learn a lot of stuff like he did.
Yeah, and it's
maybe not as severe.
It's like anything, we start out as Christians and we need milk, to get started. But at some point, we graduate to more solid food, just like a baby and a child growing up. So our attitudes change as we learn more, and
being grateful. One of the things that struck me about the Corey Tindman story, if y'all are familiar, I think most of y'all are, was the one line that really, really struck me very strongly when they were in the concentration camp and they were in the women's dormitory, whatever they called it, and it was full of fleas. It was so full of fleas that the guard wouldn't even go in there. And Corey was complaining to her sister, and forgive me, I can't think of her sister's name, but she was complaining to her sister, this place is just so full of fleas, it's awful. And her sister says, but Corey, this is a blessing from God. We're able to speak to people about Jesus because the guard won't come in here for the fleas. I mean, just to turn that completely around. I mean, it struck me through the whole story and everything that goes in it. That was the one thing that really struck me, the blessing of the fleas.
Yeah. So, and that's the thing. I mean, there is a situation with people in want. Really, they want to rid of fleas. But what did they do? They were able to turn it around and use it to glorify God. Talking to Friday night went to a baseball game, and one of the football players, the quarterback, as a matter of fact, was walking up, and I started talking to him. And I said, well, I said, I'm looking forward to your workout starting in May. And I said, I'll be going to those and hanging out with you guys. He said, oh, I guess you didn't hear. And I said, here. And he said, I'm leaving the school. I'm going to, it's either going, I guess is it Country Day that's up here in Davidson? Yeah, I think it's Country Day or
Yeah,
something.
yeah.
And he's been recruited to go there.
Amazing football. Nathan got recruited, getting recruited good.
Yeah, yeah. So I just said to him, I said, well, who are you ultimately playing? And of course he knew the answer. Whether he believed the answer, I don't know, but he knew the answer because of what I've been saying to him. He's heard me for a couple of years now, but it's that idea. And these kids have tough decisions to make now athletically. I mean, even like in this area, a good football player gets offers from high schools, particularly the private schools, but they get them from, you'll have kids leave one high school and go to the next one next door and transfer to it, and they do it, and the reason is to play football, but that's supposedly not the reason that you transfer, and yet they do it, and they have these decisions to make, and it's not easy. Now in college, these kids are having to make decisions about whether they're going to stay at this school and be, the loyalty has gone away. The loyalty has gone away, and so they've got tough situations. And for the Christian kids that are getting into that situation, because somebody, I guess it was a baseball player, and he's been in the minor leagues for 7 years, never called up. Called up first game, first time he's up to bat the other night, he hits a home run, and and they played him out of position that night, but his wife was there, and they interviewed her, and she said, we just have to thank the Lord for getting here after 7 years of struggle to do that. So there's a lot of stuff that goes on that is really difficult for young athletes, so they have to decide whether they covet something or whether they covet their relationship with Christ. And then for what reason? What's the ultimate reason that you're playing? And that's what I want to ask kids. Our theme for this year is glorifying God in what you do. And so, I'm developing a talk based on that we there are two kinds of people that play ball. There are those that glorify God. So I'm going to develop that as a chapel talk.
You can use that scene from Chariots of Fire, where Little says, God made me fast. And I glorify him.
Yeah,
I thought that was really great.
Yeah, unfortunately, these kids probably have never even heard of that.
Well, then they should watch it.
Well, yeah, they should watch it. They should watch it, but you can't. Kids don't watch movies unless they got a lot of animation.
No, but I mean, now
I'm just saying,
for you,
yeah,
and then you could, after the movie, say, let's discuss the difference between Little and and Abraham. Anyway.
So, but so.
Making that one. You probably watch a remake.
Are they? Oh, okay. Well, that's good. And
I mean, they should.
oh, you should. Well, write your check.
That scripture, whatever you do in thought, word, and deed, do all the glory of God.
Yeah.
I think of that one.
Yeah. And these are things that I talk to them about all the time. I use those scriptures and things about them. So we can't let our circumstances derail our generosity. Does that make sense? Because we might have to stretch to help somebody. Or we might have to look at our resources, and quite possibly the resources that one person has are different than the resources somebody else has. Finances are generally the big resource that we see. But what's our men's ministry doing now? What's the men's ministry do now? Doing projects, helping people. Now, the deacons did that, but the deacons generally sort of responded, I think, to needs. Didn't go looking for them as much as the men's ministry does. But that's the kind of thing. Sometimes the resources that we have are different. And so we give something of ourselves, like when I was working up in Pittsburgh, I had this old Honda. No, but let me back up. I had a van and I wrecked it. And when I was up there and I had no car, I had to rent a car, and I had no car. And the administrative assistant, they had an extra car and they gave it to me. It was a Honda that had over 200,000 miles on it. And I drove it back and forth until the transmission burned up. But it's that kind of thing. Do you have a resource that somebody needs? When missionaries needed a place to stay, we had a resource that we could use. When David Gullett needed a place to stay close to the church, we had a resource that he could use. So as a church, we take our resources. As individuals, we take our resources and we try to use them. And we don't do it to get, as with Ananias and Sapphira, we don't do it to get praise for it. We do it because it needs to be done.
Paul says back here, just share this first, if we went a long time ago, we went through this, but he says, in humility, count others more significant than yourselves. Let each of you look not only to his own interests, but the interests of others. So what Paul is saying, it's a matter of priorities.
Mm-hmm.
So if someone else's welfare should be a priority.
Yes.
That's what he's saying. And then he gives the example of the great Christ hymn in the humility. That's the key.
Yep. Jesus is a great example of things. And so we need to keep all those things in mind as we go on in our Christian life. It's really important to do that. Any other thoughts? We're kind of to the end of this. This is like the longest thing that we've probably in this entire series. This is the longest passage that we've dealt with. And next week we're going back to one verse. But it's been amazing what we've been getting out of these verses. But it didn't. This is so self-explanatory in what he's saying here. It's just there's some things we can glean out of it. But
First, if you have food and shelter, you should be content with that somewhere, Thessalonians or something. But it seems like you're almost more content with less. The more you get, it seems like the more you want, and you're actually less content.
yeah, I think that all human beings have addictive behaviors. We all have something. Some of those addictive behaviors work themselves out in really bad ways. Alcoholism, using drugs, all those kinds of things. But for the normal person, how are we addicted? What you just said, we get something, we buy a car, right? Let's say we buy a car, and it's an older car. It has hand crank windows. All right. A week later, you're thinking, why didn't I get a car with power windows? You're not satisfied. So we get something and we have it for a while. If we buy a computer, we get a computer, and then we say, oh man, I wish I'd gotten a faster one.
The next new thing's always coming.
Yeah, well, there's always something new coming, but you know, it's like, so we never wind up being satisfied. And that's something that we need to break.
That's the country especially.
Yeah, so, you know, and even when you take into consideration the conflicts, why do we have conflicts? Greed. Somebody wants something that is yours that they don't have.
The land, Putin.
Yeah.
Trying to gain, regain.
Yeah, land, whatever it was. I mean, when you look at a conflict, it's generally one of two things or both of them. It's land and money. Land and money. Follow the money, you'll find the
It could be golf clubs.
yeah.
My
Well,
friend John, when he sneezes, $20 bills fly out all over the place. So I say to him, do me a favor, John, if you go before me, would you leave your gloves to me?
That's like,
I need to be healed.
yeah, I'm praying for you, Bill. Praying for you.
that's the lifeblood of the advertising industry.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Make you discontent.
Well, you know, it's not so much done anymore, but it used to be cars were on a 3-year cycle.
Yeah, you're right. Built-in obsolescence.
Yeah, so that people were buying cars. Now, people just buy cars. They don't think of, you know, I'm amazed. Yeah, I'm thinking, like, trying to think how long ago we bought that Subaru used. And it was like around $10,000, right? So now the same car that's like maybe 4 years or 4 years newer than what ours is, $20,000 for a car that has 100,000 miles on it.
Yeah.
Cars cost the same now as houses used to.
Yes,
Trucks,
yes.
trucks
Oh yeah.
are crazy.
I look at some of these new cars and the amount of money that they will give you back on them that they're promising to give you back. It's more than the first car that, well, it's more than, it's approaching more than anything I've ever paid on a car. You know,
You
So-
can mortgage cars now for 7 years.
Yes.
You get a 7-year loan.
yeah. So, and that's how people get underwater because they've got a 7-year more loan on a car, and the car needs replaced after 4, and they've got to
You
pay
just keep
that.
trading, that's
Yeah.
how they hook you. You
Yeah.
just keep trading. That's
And
why
they-
people trade when
yeah.
they need new tires, they'll just trade.
Yeah. So,
I still just sell cars.
Another conflict today is unmet expectations.
yes.
Keeping up with the
You know,
Joneses.
you don't really think about the whole situation that you're in a conflict. You're expecting that person to, if it's a Christian you're dealing with, to respond in a certain way. And when they don't, you are totally disappointed in what just happened, and you're blaming that person.
Yeah.
But really, it's your unmet expectations. of
Yeah,
them.
I just,
To think that they're on a higher level, or maybe they're a little more mature in the faith, but you find out that they're not. And then you have to sort of deal with that. That's where conflicts, I think, come in.
yeah, I just heard that one of the biggest problems with marriages is unmet expectations.
Was number one in marriage was money,
Yeah,
and that's what causes all the divorces. If you buy a car, according to Ramsey, the payments on cars right now for the average person that's walking around outside is about $500 a month.
yeah,
That blows my mind, really, when I think about it.
Yeah.
But it's what they do to keep up with everybody else, maybe in the neighborhood, whatever, and work, especially at work. And one of the
Yeah.
last stress at work to conform, but
I can't, pickup trucks, $60,000.
Oh, yes. You used to drive a truck when I was a kid because you were poor.
Yeah,
And you couldn't afford a car.
you know,
Now there's
Steve-
$60,000.
Steve had, at Shear, when we were at Shear, Steve had a Datsun pickup truck.
Yeah, Dodson, I remember.
Datsun, I mean, it wasn't Nissan, it was a Datsun. And it was a beater. It was a beater. But man, he drove it, it was great. And then one guy got on session that said, Steve, you shouldn't be going on pastoral visits in that. And the guy got the session to agree that Steve was told not to use that. Just do that.
That's ridiculous.
Now, if he had had it here, everybody'd say, hey man, is that a great truck?
Well, if you had 240Z from that year, it'd be worth a fortune.
Yeah. So, well, let's look at our questions. Which of his reasons for writing the letter to the Philippians does Paul allude to in 4:10 to 14?
General. Oh, sorry.
He is thanking them for the positive good.
Yes, you got it right, Bill.
Oh, good.
Bill never gets some.
Usually I copy from John.
Did say,
Okay, which of the following best describes the meaning of the word content in Philippians 4:11?
you say it's D, but
Hey.
I don't think it is. Oh, yeah.
Now, the word itself, the way it's used,
You're
the
saying-
way it would come over from Greek.
Oh, is it D then?
Yeah, see that. Yeah, I mean, all those would fit, but the way it's used there, that's the issue. Yeah, yeah, but that's the way it comes across.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying.
From Greek, yeah. So it's self-sufficient. Paul's reference to humble means in Philippians 4:12 most closely relates to which of the following?
James. I'm guessing B.
Don't remember what he's reading. Say, difficult times in life require believers to do without things they need. Which English word is related? You have to think back on this a little bit. To the Greek root of the word strengthens in Philippians 4:13.
Is that dunamis?
Dunamis?
That's absolutely right. It's strength.
Dunamis.
Yeah, he uses a Greek word. Yes.
For Greek.
Yes. But you could have been.
This is an unusual day. I got two
Yeah,
right.
you could have been tricked though and said power, because that's also a derivative of dunamis.
You have to tell us these things during your lecture.
Well,
so that we don't
I
have
meant
this-
to do that and I didn't. Sorry, but you still got the scripture. God strengthens Christians to do everything that He calls them to do. Is that true or false?
I can do all this.
If he calls you to do something,
Yes.
he supplies your needs to do
Yes.
that.
Yes.
He equips the call, not call the equip.
Which of the following
I like
best
that.
Which of the following best describes what humans supply alongside the power that God supplies?
Well,
Yeah, I'm thinking that too. Maybe
that's
it's faith.
describing human supply alongside the power.
Probably D.
You guys are all good. You're all good.
Maybe
All
you
right.
the question's there.
All right. He breaks the power of canceled sin. He sets the prisoner free. His blood can make the foulest clean. His blood availed for me. And that's what brings us joy. And a Christian is never in a state of completion, but always in a process of becoming. Next week, the God who provides. The God who provides.
Are there any prayer requests for the prayer warriors? Anybody have any prayer requests?
Prayer requests? Yes, I have some tests coming up.
Yes. More tests.
Have some more tests.
You're gonna be tested.
Look at my calendar. That looks ridiculous.
I thought you were diagnosed. I didn't.
I am, but that doesn't mean you're not done with me.
Good report.
Just beginning.
All right. Bob, would you dismiss us?
Father God, it's wonderful to sit down here and discuss the things that all at some point in our life, we all go through things where we get anxiety, we get this, we get that, but we want to have our total dependence on you, Lord. And thank you for the discussion that we have here today. And be with us, Steve, as a service to Paul. And thank you for Dennis and all the preparation he does for this. In Christ's name, we pray. Amen.